6 tips to sound more like a native speaker. Speaking English with a native accent has incredible benefits. But how can you achieve this? In this video, I'll give you 6 proven tips that you can incorporate into your study routine to help you sound more like a native speaker. Welcome to Smart and Easy English. Please subscribe for more great content and make sure you click the bell and select all so you don't miss any of our future videos. Tip 1. Focus on phonetics from the very beginning. When starting to learn a new language, many learners avoid focusing on accent. Instead, they worry about grammar and vocabulary, hoping that someday they'll develop a great accent. This is short-sighted for several reasons. First, ignoring phonetics, which are sounds, pronunciation, and intonation of a language, makes it difficult to communicate effectively. If you can't pronounce the language properly, others won't understand you. And if you can't distinguish between sound and intonation changes, you won't understand others. Secondly, neglecting proper pronunciation and intonation leads to bad habits. Pronunciation, like other physical skills such as swimming or riding a bike, becomes hard to change once a certain way of doing things becomes automatic. Start practicing pronunciation and intonation from the very beginning of your learning. Make them a priority to avoid developing a bad accent. Tip 2. Learn intonation first, then pronunciation. A common method of teaching phonetics follows a bottom-up approach, where you start from the smallest units, sounds, and gradually combine those elements to create language, which are words and sentences. The bottom-up approach treats sounds like Lego blocks, like they're small units of language that can be combined any which way without ever changing. But that's not how intonation works. Sounds are not static. They're dynamic elements which can change depending on context. For example, the phrase want to and going to in English are often reduced to wanna and gonna in normal, casual speech. However, with the bottom-up approach, you might miss this common sound change and end up sounding more stilted and unnatural. I recommend a top-down approach. Start with intonation, then try to perfect individual sounds. Sounds are dynamic and change depending on context, so starting with intonation helps you learn proper pronunciation within actual sentences or phrases. Starting with intonation takes these important changes into account. You learn the proper intonation and pronunciation for an entire sentence or phrase with all the variations. Then you can break it down into smaller pieces. To get started on the top-down approach, follow the next few steps, starting with listening and reading. Tip 3. Listen and read along. To learn the intonation and pronunciation of sentences, use content with audio versions. Beginners should use textbooks and resources specifically designed for learners, as they often provide audio versions of the texts. Read the text while listening to the audio. For example, our audio stories display the words right on the screen. The audio provides you with proper intonation and pronunciation, while the text serves as an anchor, connecting sounds to written words. This activity eliminates the guesswork and provides a perfect accent model to emulate. Tip number 4. Mark and label phonetic details by hand. Written English often fails to correspond to actual spoken sounds. To help with this, use pen and paper to mark and label important pronunciation or intonation details on the printed text. When listening and reading, print out the text or use a physical book. Mark up the text, taking note of intonation patterns, sound changes, word stress, sentence stress, and silent letters. These notes you're taking will help you remember, making it easier to study later without the audio. Tip number 5. Practice pronunciation by reading texts aloud. Once you've marked up a text that you've listened to and read multiple times, try reading it out loud without the accompanying audio. Think of it like singing your favorite song for the first time. You know how it sounds, but you now need to reproduce it in your own voice. Follow the written text, reproducing the tonal patterns and sounds as accurately as possible. Start slowly and don't worry about speed. Tip number 6. Get feedback from native speakers. Native speakers have an innate ability to detect the slightest deviation from a native accent. Take advantage of this skill by getting feedback from them. Read texts aloud to a native speaker or send voice notes for feedback. Even if they're not pronunciation experts, they can tell you when something sounds non-native or unnatural. Use their feedback to fine-tune your accent. Working with an educated native speaker or accent coach can further improve your pronunciation and accent. So there you have it, 6 tips to sound more like a native speaker. Let's recap. Tip number 1, focus on phonetics from the very beginning. Tip 2, learn intonation first, then pronunciation. Tip 3, listen and read along. Tip 4, mark and label phonetic details by hand. Tip 5, practice pronunciation by reading texts aloud. Tip 6, get feedback from native speakers. By following these 6 tips, you'll be able to improve your American accent and sound more like a native speaker. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Until next time, remember to enjoy the journey. Bye for now.